Do you have the correct data? If you don't have the correct data, there is a risk.
How confident are you that your payroll and reward data currently influences those board level conversations within your organisation?
Well, actually, the data that we hold isn't the only data. There is lots of other data held in different areas of the business that we don't have control of.
What does global payroll without borders actually look like in real life? It's one platform handling every country you operate in, real-time insights, automated tax logic, and no messy handoffs between HR, IT, finance, or local vendors. That's what happens when payroll runs on Deal's own global infrastructure. It's faster, it's cleaner, and it's built for teams that need accuracy every single time. See it for yourself at deel.com/nickday. Welcome back to the Payroll Podcast. I'm Nick Day. Now, this is a slightly different kind of episode. Instead of a one-to-one conversation or interview, what you're about to hear is a webinar recorded and produced by Reward Strategy, and it's shared here with their kind permission. The topic is one I think every payroller needs to sit with, which is data analytics in decision-making. And here's the thing about payroll data. You already have it. You generate it every single pay cycle. Overtime patterns, absence spikes, pay equity gaps, retention signals, information that finance, HR, and the C-suite would pay serious money for if they knew you had it. But most payroll professionals don't turn that data into a conversation. It sits in a report or a spreadsheet, or worse, a closed folder that nobody ever opens. I'm hoping that this webinar session is going to change that for you. You're going to hear from a number of expert panelists on how to move payroll data from passive reporting into active decision-making, what to measure, what to ignore, and how to tell a story with the numbers that gets executives to actually act. A big thank you here to Vickie, Graham, and the team at Reward Strategy for letting me share this with the Payroll Podcast community. Let's get into it.
So welcome to our Payroll and Reward Insight series. This one is with the lovely Anna Laiu on data analytics and decision making. And Anna and I have had lots of conversations about the work that she's been doing within PPHE. So I was like, you have to come on, and we have to run a Payroll and Reward Insight series to kind of showcase not only what you're doing, but support others in terms of kind of data analytics and how that can influence decision making and get payroll and reward heard at the C-suite. So I'm really excited to be talking to Anna today. As I mentioned, we do encourage those that are comfortable to have their cameras on, and it's also designed to be an engaging and interactive event. So if you do have a question, if you've got something to contribute to the discussion, please feel free to put your hand up or put it in the chat, and we'll bring that in so that Anna and I can talk about that as the question or the comment kind of coincides with the discussion that we have. And as I mentioned, we are recording this session, so it will be hosted in our on-demand section. And Meg, who's joined us as well from the team, will be doing a write-up, which we'll put out in the newsletter. So don't worry too much about taking lots of notes. There will be a write-up and there will be a recording that you can refer back to.
Good morning, everyone, from me. It's really, really great to be here, to see so many familiar faces, to see so many people. Hello to everyone. I think I've seen some of you in the last few months, some of you I haven't seen for a while. So it's really great to see you. And thank you, Vickie, for the invite. Indeed, we had so many conversations around this topic, and I think it's just so interesting on where the industry is going towards, and, you know, what is it that we can do as professionals to support our businesses, but also to kind of elevate our own status within our organizations, within our industry. And I think it's quite critical, and again, it's quite topical for this time of the year, right? Networking and speaking up. And if we do something that's added value to our employers, I'm a strong believer of sharing that with the wider community and supporting each other in kind of moving on to do greater things, to add more value to our employers, and to actually support each other's development and really champion each other in the industry. So thank you. It's, you know, I'm really, really excited for this morning's session.
Thanks, Anna. I am as well. And you do brilliantly at giving back. So Anna, as well as her full-time role, is also a board director and a tutor for the CIPP, and you're a mentor for the GPA, I believe, as well. So Anna gives loads of time back to the community. So before we get started, we do have a poll question for all of you. So the poll will be popping up on your screens very shortly, and it's around confidence in your data. So how confident are you that your payroll and reward data currently influences those board level conversations within your organization? So you got the 4 options there. So really interested, just give you a little bit of time to put your answers in. And also we will be discussing, so everyone's responded there. How are we doing, Meg? Have we got lots of responses? There we go. So if we bring that up. Okay, so that's actually more promising than I thought. So Anna, what are your views? We've got 14% very confident, which is brilliant. We've got 55% somewhat confident. We're getting there, but there's still more work to do. 27% who are not very confident and think that insights are often overlooked, and 5% who are just not confident at all, saying that their data rarely reach the C-suite. What are your views on that, Anna?
I am not surprised by the results, and I speak a little bit about my personal experience about confidence in the data. So for those of us who clicked somewhat confident, I think your perception of your confidence within the data and the reality of how accurate the data is can sometimes be different things. And I think, speaking from my perspective as somebody that's been in the industry for a long time, had so many instances in the past where I thought I'm really confident in the data, and then it transpired that I wasn't actually correct. So I'm not surprised by the poll. I think it is getting better in terms of technologies and integrating data and standardizing data. But I think that there are pockets within businesses, and I think from my experience as well, at least from our own organization, and we've moved quite a lot on that journey. I've been with the organization for almost 11 years now. That kind of journey between what your perception is within your department of how accurate your data is and the perception of the business overall of actually integrating the data and the data flows between different departments, that can be more challenging. But I think it's really encouraging to see that people are gaining confidence within their own organization, that actually the data that sits within their remit, they feel, somewhat confident that is accurate. And again, that will differ depending on business, depending on industry, depending on tech ecosystem each organization has. Yeah, but I think we are moving in the right direction, but definitely a lot of work still remains to be done.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. And it was great to see like that high percentage in the somewhat confident and that percentage in the very confident as well. And actually, if we'd asked this question, maybe even just 5-6 years ago, that may have been very different. I think there's some work we can do at Reward Strategy as well, just picking up on your point there, that it will be different in different businesses, different industries. So maybe we can kind of delve into that, not for now, but another time. So we'll think about what we can do there. Just as a follow-up question then, a follow-up poll question, which will appear up shortly. There's a wide range of pay and reward data available. So, which type of data, pay and reward data, do you think is most underutilized by leadership teams today? Quite interested to see this. We've got employee well-being and engagement data. We've got turnover and retention insights, pay equity and diversity metrics, which is very topical, obviously, at the moment, and cost and budget forecasting data. So which is the most underutilized, do we think there? We'll just give some time for the responses to be coming in. And I hope that Meg is looking at that poll, just keeping an eye on those numbers. I mean, it's all brilliant. It's all really interesting. Okay, so a bit of a mix there. So 25% employee wellbeing and engagement data underutilized, 29% say turnover and retention insights. I think that's quite interesting. Pay equity and diversity metrics at 38% being underutilized, which I think is very interesting given all of the work that's being done at the moment, particularly with the EU Pay Transparency Directive. Finally, cost and budget forecasting data, 8%. Probably not surprising that businesses are actually utilising that. Anna, what is your take on those results?
I think it's really good to see the split between the top 3. I think that is really interesting, and that probably is evident of where everybody is within their own organisation and the data that they collect. Because underutilising data, you first have to have have the data, and sometimes it's very difficult to decide what is the data. And then different people, different business functions will have different views on what the data actually is, right? I know we like to talk about this, but I think unsurprisingly, cost is something that a lot of businesses have been focusing on, because that is central to their business performance. That is central for their business to continue to be a going concern. That is central to deliver value for shareholders, for example. That is, central to kind of making sure they are profitable if they are for-profit organization, and so on. However, the kind of the top three is really interesting to really see that kind of in terms of what organizations collect in the top three categories. How do they use that data? And different organizations will be using it differently depending on where the organization is going, kind of what are the strategic objectives, what are the gaps within their organization. And actually, it's really nice to see that split, because it just shows that different people see opportunities in different areas within their organization. So if we look at the question, yes, it's underutilized. So probably that's what people feel, actually, I would like to use a lot more of this. That kind of, to me, translates as an opportunity that maybe we need to lean into those areas that we've identified as underutilized in terms of data, and see what we can do to better align with the organization.
Yeah, agree. And I think that's exactly right. It aligns with the organization and the organization values. So the data that is utilized is probably aligned with the organization in terms of what their values are and their key focus areas. But I think it's interesting as well, because my view on that is all four of those areas are all actually really intrinsically linked. I don't feel that you can have insight into one without the other. And I feel, if you're looking at things like employee well-being, that's going to impact on your retention and motivation, and therefore will impact on your cost and your business performance. So I think they're all really intrinsically linked. There's a couple of comments that have come up in the chat, which we will come to. So Katie, Anna and I are definitely going to come to that. So we won't raise that one now. If you don't feel like we have answered that question later, then please let us know and we'll come again. And then Jodie, I think some of the big HCM systems are really keeping up with the need for timely and detailed data. Many of the smaller software houses are seeming to struggle with this. Possibly an accurate reflection. I see a real mix. In my role, obviously, I have a lot of conversations with system providers about what they're doing and how they're developing. And I think with AI and automation and the tools that are being developed there, that's helping them with coming up to date with the need for the timely and detailed data. So be interesting to kind of discuss that a little bit more as well. So I'm going to come to Anna now. We've got some questions prepared. So what do you see as the most underutilized data points that could provide real strategic value to the C-suite? And within your role, Anna, how do you prioritize which data points are worth bringing to the attention of senior leaders?
That's a really good question, Vickie. And again, I think my answer is probably centered around my experience. And I do acknowledge that different people would kind of see different priorities within their own organizations. And I think we could see from the poll that different people are looking at this from a different lens. I think from my point of view, when we talk about underutilized data points, from kind of a reward perspective, I would say for me, one of them is pay progression over time.
Yeah.
And that in our organization has been quite key, as it can really highlight how different employee groups progress through the pay bands. And depending on what different organizations have in terms of their pay structures, it can really show where talent is thriving. And it's a really complex piece of work, I think, to do if you want to go down that rabbit hole. I quite love a data rabbit hole myself. It can really give an organization a really good insight into where most of the investment is made. Dive deeper in understanding why. Is there a kind of a reward versus performance correlation there? And it can be really helpful to understand if we reward performance, for example, as opposed to length of service. And we've seen a little bit of that in our organization, where obviously as an organization, you want to retain people. You want to reward your long-standing employees and your loyal employees. But I think for us as an agile and dynamic business that we are hospitality, things have shifted massively for us since the pandemic. And to date, we've had to adapt our business model. We kind of had to look at different revenue streams. It's been really exciting for us as an organization, but from that pay progression over time, I think if we look, it can really open up a big piece of data in terms of our dynamics, for example, in housekeeping have changed. The workforce mix in housekeeping has massively changed since Brexit and since the pandemic, right? So if we are to then look to say, is there a direct correlation of pay progression for that function? Absolutely, there is. And then if you take that forward and say, well, why did we go into that direction? It's really clearly evident because there was a driver which impacted us, and us as a business needed to change that model, that workforce model for that business function. One of the factors was that our workforce demographic changed massively within that population, within that side of the business. So therefore, we've increased headcount. We reduced average working hours to be able to diversify, to allow that flexibility. And I think if we look at how different functions have progressed in terms of pay, that's given us quite a lot of insight into then, okay, so if the demographic has changed, the pay progression has changed, are we having a completely different workforce mix in that business unit? Do we need to look at well-being initiatives? Do we need to look at how we support these people? Do we need to look at a completely different set of needs that these people have, and how their pay progresses over time in comparison to other business units that potentially don't have that kind of similar pressures, let's say? So that for us has been quite critical. And, you know, as a business, maybe historically, maybe 10 years ago, we were rewarding people, you know, loyalty. Essentially, now we really need to diversify how we reward people and how do we progress people through our pay bands over time. And I think if we then put the payroll lens on the question and we think, you know, what is the most underutilized data points, I think you will be surprised that I'm going to say it's payroll cost per business unit or cost center. And I could see in the poll, and it was really interesting because a lot of people feel that that's actually being utilized quite a lot. Within the business. I think for us as a, you know, we operate in EMEA, it's really interesting because when you look at that payroll cost per business unit and cost center, that can be split differently in different countries. And there's a difference between base pay, what is considered as variable pay, what is considered as overtime or other pay elements depending on industry, and the attached employer cost. And I think you can see a lot of models in terms of looking at payroll cost per business or business unit or cost center. But then actually, if you look at those regional differences, there is a huge amount of work that needs to be done to align that data, because what base pays in the UK or the Netherlands or Italy or Germany or Hungary is viewed, you know, differently. So then if you are to look at that, kind of saying, well, that's kind of traditional, everybody looks at cost. But actually, I feel that there's a lot of work that us as individuals within our own roles can actually do to support the business to say, you take this as your payroll cost per cost center. But actually, if we are to look at the data, especially for an international or global organization, can be very, very different. And I've chosen this one in favor of the other ones because this can be seen as the business is doing well in this area. But actually, we can add a lot of value if we kind of go down into the detail and say, how can we make this data detailed enough? Because it is essential for any business to understand the true cost of talent, not what they think it is, but the true cost of talent, and be able to measure business targets. And like productivity is a big thing that everybody talks about. Actually, it's really, really important to understand and to know that you've got the complete data and the correct data. And coming to the second part of your question of how do you prioritize, I think it's prioritization is a strategic importance to businesses, as this is directly linked to business as a priority. And you can link this to growth, you can link this to cost management, you can link this to the employee experience. You know, it just touches all areas of the business. And you really need to ensure that your executives can really use this data to make strategic decisions and relevant to the business. And I think risk is a really important factor here, because if you ignore risk, and again, going back to that data, do you have the correct data? If you don't have the correct data, there is a risk. There is a risk to compliance, there is a legal risk, it could be a reputational risk, financial risk, if the priorities are not set correctly and actioned upon correctly. And I think it's for us as individuals to be able to support our business in terms of defining those priorities. Is important that we write a compelling story.
Yeah.
You know, it's really, really important that we take the business on that journey with us and kind of what is the impact? I think we all see in the business, a lot of the times we go to the table and we say, I have this problem and this is the pain pressure for me. And you talk about the challenge. And when you go to C-suite, they don't, it's not that they don't care about your challenge, is that it's what is the impact on the business. And I think because we're quite emotional as individuals in our industry, it's important to detach a little bit and just take that emotion out and say, well, this is the impact on the business. And I think that is really, really critical for us as teams to move into that space. Otherwise, you're presenting interesting data, but it's not really actionable.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, Anna, because I think a lot of whether or not you are heard at that level is how you are positioning what you are saying. And you're right, if you're going, well, I've got this challenge, without sounding rude, the response might be, well, so what? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for the business? And that's what needs to be demonstrated with the data that you're positioning and putting forward. What's the cost? What's the impact? What's the benefit in terms of retention or cost savings? And I really liked your point about, you talked about Brexit and the pandemic, which I think just really highlights that actually there's so many external factors that as pay and reward professionals, we need to be aware of and looking at and saying, well, how is that actually impacting what I'm seeing day to day in terms of, say, starting salaries as an example. We all know, and I can see that Ian's on here as a recruiter, that salaries in payroll during and post pandemic went up because of the value that payroll was bringing during that time and the furlough payments. And actually what I saw in a number of organizations that I was talking to your point about pay progression and loyalty, was that then you had this disparity because you had long-serving employees who were on what was considered a competitive salary for that time that suddenly weren't when new people were being brought in on what was then perceived to be competitive because of what had changed in the wider environment. So quite liked that discussion.
I think payroll cost is an easy win for us as payroll teams, right? Because that has a direct impact and is tangible to C-suite, because it's literally looking at the bottom line. So it's an easy win for us, but getting it right for me is the key. Is actually understanding what you're putting in there is really important, and making sure that that's complete and accurate to enable that strategic decision making.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you, Anna. And there's some really lovely comments in the chat as well about this discussion and your insights, which I'll come to later. So just kind of following on in terms of the data, and we talked a little bit, there was a comment earlier about HCM systems. There are so many different systems and sources of information and data within pay and reward. What challenges have you faced in standardizing that data across different functions and business units?
It's a really, really, really good question, because I think for us as a business operating in different geographical locations, it's very, very segregated ecosystem of technology, right? So for us in each country, we were using a different technology in each of the countries, right? So for us as an organization, actually thinking, well, if we want to do some analysis on, for example, like we were saying, pay progression over time, getting that data from the different systems, aligning it. And here we're not just talking about currencies, right? It's just saying, how do you make sure you look at, you compare apples to apples, getting all that data, naming conventions, making sure that when you're extracting data from the different system and consolidating that data, you're actually aligning that the same type of data item across all the different countries and geographical locations. And for us, it's been a real challenge, because we had different systems in different countries in their own native language, right? So actually getting all that data standardized, getting all that data integrity together, the data aligned, has been real challenge for us. And this is really essential, because when you're generating insights that C-suite can base decisions on, if this is not done correctly and the data integrity is compromised, even the most sophisticated analytics that you can think of can result in misinterpretation, misalignment, inaccurate cost management, and budgeting potentially. And I'm sure we all are in budgeting season at the moment, and that can be quite intense. And also it can lead to missed opportunities, because if you're not looking the data correctly, how do you know that you're making the right decisions for the business at the right time? And for us, this fragmented technology across these different geographical locations has been the biggest challenge. Different payroll providers, different platforms, legacy systems, different system gets updated at different times. And sometimes you try to get the most of your out of your systems. You try to kind of customize some of the systems to kind of give you the most that you have. When we have an internal data team, and we have quite progressed over the last 5 years, let's say, we have that internal data team that has gone through that really difficult challenging of kind of making sure that we work well with the systems that we have. But we did make a strategic decision to actually, based on the pure fact that we do have this fragmented technology ecosystem across the business, we have made the strategic decision to move to a global system. And we are in the very early stages of that transformation for us, because we really wanted to focus on creating a single version and source of truth. We are a very complex business. There are different stakeholders involved in data collection, data management, and reporting. And I've had some really interesting conversations lately with pay and reward professionals, where they were looking at their data from their own lens. Well, this is the data that we have. Well, actually, the data that we hold isn't the only data. There is lots of other data held in different areas of the business that we don't have control of. Sometimes we don't even have visibility of. And again, like we were saying earlier, you may have this misconception that you've got control of your data, but actually, what is the data? It's not just your data. The data, sits across different business functions. And I think also the challenges for me personally, and also for us as an industry, how do you business partner with all these other stakeholders that own parts of the data that ends up on our table in one shape or form? So, it's just really business partnering internally, working with the other departments and understanding what is the data. And again, I can't stress enough, what is the data is so important. It's not just the data that we have, is the data that the business has as a whole, and we're kind of a piece of that puzzle. And for us as an organization, we really wanted to move to a state where manual entry is reduced to an absolute minimum. I think it's really difficult still to say that manual entry is obsolete. And we wanted to really automate data transfers as far as possible to reduce that inconsistency, because once you integrate that data and then you have those automated data flows, then you can ensure that you have one version of the truth as much as possible. Yeah. And again, for international global organizations, that can be quite tricky, aligning data and getting it into one place. And that's kind of what drove our strategic decision to say, no, we actually need one global system, one version of the truth as much as possible. And it's really interesting, because once we started looking at that, and we thought, well, we're going to get this piece of tech, and it's going to do people, it's going to do talent acquisition, it's going to do HR, workforce management, payroll. And then all these other different areas said, no, we want a piece of that. We want to send you data. We want to receive data from you. So again, what is the data, and where is the data coming from? Where is the data going? And that can be quite crucial to support that ambition of creating that single version of the truth. And that can be incredibly challenging once you start unpicking it.
Attention payroll leaders, if you're listening to this, you already know that payroll has never been more complex. Compliance risks are rising, skilled talent is scarce, and getting it wrong can cost your business way more than just money. It can cost you trust, retention, and of course, brand reputation. I'm Nick Day, host of this show and also CEO of JGA Recruitment Group, specialist global payroll recruiters. Here at JGA, we're so passionate about payroll, we've even turned it into music. Don't believe us? Head to your favorite audio platform and search for Payroll Powers the World, and you can quite literally join us in song about how we believe payroll deserves its moment in the boardroom to shine. At JGA, we'd like to think our passion shines through to our recruitment results as well. With a 97% retention rate and an average 19-day job brief to hire success rate, we work fast, we work strategically, and we work with purpose to connect you to the hidden payroll talent that job ads and direct search methods will simply never reach. So if you're hiring or indeed planning to hire, why not partner with the experts that are shaping the future of payroll? Partner with jgarecruitment.com today, or better yet, drop me a message directly, and together we can make sure your next payroll hire is your best one yet.
Yeah, it is very, very challenging, but so important. And I think those integrations and APIs are critical to having that data flow, as you talk about. There's a lot of comments on this, just about, so many different reward providers and systems, just collating it's difficult. Again, I think that's where those conversations with your providers about where can that integration be? Can the data flow between different places? Neve's put a comment in about being a charity and trying to find those platforms to display everything is like, it's cost prohibitive, which is definitely a challenge for a lot of businesses. I can see Claire said you might be able to suggest someone. And Neve dropped me a note as well, because I was chatting to an organisation, and I won't name on here, but I was chatting to an organisation who are very much kind of looking to support SMEs and charities who don't have big budgets. So it might be helpful. And Ian, thank you around the salary data support for reaching out there. Okay, we've got another poll question. We're having a great, I'm loving the discussion. Anna, it's just brilliant. We have got a poll question for everyone in the audience now as well. So what's the biggest barrier to creating consistent, reliable pay and reward data across your organization? Some of you have been putting this in the chat already, so it'd be interesting to see how the results come in. So is it fragmented systems and tech? Is it the differing process across regions and teams? Is it the lack of leadership prioritization, or the data accuracy and quality issues, which are all things that you've talked about, Anna, and raised already? Katie, all of the above. I know you have to choose the biggest barrier though, just one. One of them is going to be more, which also helps in terms of thinking about priorities when you come off this event, thinking about your starting point. If one of these is the biggest barrier, that's going to be the priority area to focus on, I would say, Anna.
I would say, and again, just the same as with the previous poll, right, is where the box that you tick is that's where your pressure point is at the moment.
Okay, I'm not surprised. The results are in, and I'm not surprised that 59% have said the fragmented systems and tech, and then pretty even split between the differing processes across regions and teams, the lack of leadership prioritization, the data accuracy and quality issues. I mean, data accuracy for someone like me in the type of role that I do is always a challenge, but for pay and reward, you'd kind of hope that it isn't as big a challenge. I know there are obviously challenges there, but not as much. So fragmented systems and tech, biggest barrier. Anna, what's your view?
Absolutely, it still is. And I was having an interesting conversation at the CIPP conference last week, where I think in some areas of businesses and for some people, there is this misconception that technology has evolved massively. AI is coming to take over the world. Technology is there, is delivering, is doing all of this stuff for businesses. And very often for senior decision makers, if they only see the data and it comes to them and they're happy with it, they don't actually see the effort that goes in consolidating that data. And sometimes there is that misconception that what we have works because it delivers. And if we don't articulate how much work we actually put behind that, kind of getting all these fragmented systems and these technologies to kind of talk to each other, or manual manipulation and so on. In some aspects, some senior decision makers think that you bring in a new piece of tech and it's going to change the world, it's going to fix all your problems, it's going to be the holy grail, and it very often isn't. So I think, yes, fragmented systems and technology is a barrier, and I kind of see that within my organization, talking to people, I network quite a lot, and that is an ongoing theme. However, I think we just need to be mindful, if we make this a priority, kind of understanding what are the pressure points, what does that look like for us, and kind of take that tailored approach to what systems or kind of suite of systems is right for your organization, because there isn't one size fits all. There isn't anything out of the box that is going to fit perfectly any organization that I know of. And if you know, please tell me quickly, I need it. But again, I really am not surprised. I think that's where we all are. I think it's going to get better. And, one of the comments in the chat was saying, some providers are, I think, Jody, you said some providers are getting better at that. And I absolutely say yes. However, I think in our roles, if we want to be strategic leaders, we need to think over and above our pay and reward roles. We need to think about the wider business, and how does our ambition of kind of furthering technology within our own departments, how does that fit with the wider business? Because you get better buy-in if you want to table a proposal to say, well, actually, we need a better piece of tech. What does that look like? Tailoring it to your business. Business partnering, again, I can't stress enough, with other departments to kind of say, how is it going to all gel together, come together, and have data flows in place?
That's quite interesting in terms of that comment there around the investment in tech and things. someone, I can't think who it was now, had said to me, if you take, say, a retail organization as an example, and they've got a clunky, outdated website, they're going to invest in that because of the customer experience and because it'll directly impact on sales. But the same investment and urgency around the tech in pay and reward isn't always there. So it's aligning that with what you've said, Anna, to demonstrate what the impact is and what the benefit is going to be to the business. Jodie, your comment there, feel like fragmented systems often the result of a knee-jerk reaction around well-being and benefits offers, which I think is right. Ian, most of the time when companies bring in new tech stacks, it's the hidden costs that people don't see, such as adoption, uptake, and retraining. That is absolutely spot on, Ian. And that's something that I think in my role I see quite a lot. And I have lots of conversations with both in-house pay and reward professionals and suppliers. And quite often the frustration is my system doesn't do this, or it's not doing that, or I've got this problem. But actually, I know from conversations with suppliers that it does do it. And it has got that capability. It's just that hasn't, post-implementation, that hasn't been embedded within that organization, or it's a new development that's been rolled out but not necessarily communicated effectively. So that's quite an interesting and accurate comment, and something that Reward Strategy are hoping to look to support both clients and providers in developing more of a partnership. So watch this space, because we will be making an announcement very shortly at the summit in November around what we're looking to do there to support people.
And it's a really interesting, sorry, Vickie, I just want to touch on Jodie's comment about process mapping. I cannot stress how important that is. And again, going back to my previous comment where some senior decision makers think, and even us sometimes, we say to them, don't worry, we'll bring this piece of tech and it will change the world. It's going to make everything better. It never is the case in my experience. And again, I stand to be corrected. We've spent a year before we made a decision on which technology we're going to go with. And literally what we did, we went in the trenches and we process mapped everything. We went through absolutely everything that we do as a business, because we've gone through transformations in the past within our organizations, and we felt the pain of not doing that. So we've learned, and we said, absolutely, me and other key stakeholders kind of driving the project and kind of selling the tech to the business. We said, we're not going to move an inch until we've kind of remapped our processes and we really understand what we need and want as a business, not what we think we want, what we really need as a business. And then it was a massive exercise to work with the impacted areas of the business to actually get everybody aligned and ensuring that if I change this process, how is it going to impact the person next to me? Or if they change that process, how is that going to impact my area? And it's taken us 12 months as a business, and we haven't gone through absolutely everything, I have to say, but it's been instrumental because we asked the right questions during the RFP. We could challenge vendors during the beauty parade more effectively because we were really sure what we wanted. And also we were really also sure almost on what we were willing to compromise, because no piece of tech is going to change the world for everything. No piece of tech is going to deliver 100% on everything that you want. And if you do that work and you have the clarity of actually understanding this is the kind of core of what we need, these are kind of the augmented, kind of the nice to have, or we can find a workaround and it'll still be okay for the business. That is essential, because that's how you slap a piece of tech and you think it's going to change the world, and actually it's going to make your life more difficult. Adoption is not going to happen. And then you're going to get really a lot of challenge from your C-suite to say, well, you're not delivering, what are these were the measurements. We're not really delivering on that. So again, as professionals, I think we really need to be confident to say, no, actually, we're going to do the process mapping before we choose the tech, just to kind of match like for like. Sorry, I think I'm digressing a little bit, but we've had such a positive experience with actually looking at the processes. What is it that we need, not what we think we want?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's such an important step and often overlooked. And then the frustrations come because people haven't been able to articulate what it is that they're looking to achieve in that system implementation. So Anna, I'm just conscious of time as well. So I'll just come to the next question of what role do you think technology and analytics platforms play in transforming payroll and reward data into actionable intelligence for the boardroom? And how do you strike that right balance between the automation and the human interpretation of the data? We talked a little bit about this earlier.
And again, with all the right work put in place and you go through the right selection process, I think technology and analytics platform, they can play an essential and truly transformational role in shaping payroll and reward into a center of workforce intelligence. And I've spoke about this before, and I'm really passionate about this term, center of workforce intelligence, because it truly is the data that we have really can enable us to position ourselves as this center of workforce intelligence. And we need to really, really carefully balance that automation with human interpretation, because there's a lot of buzz now about our AI, and I think that's used interchangeably quite a lot with RPA. You know, and there's loads and loads of forums, lots of conversations about what AI is and kind of what it can do, and it's brilliant. We've been using RPA for decades and decades. We've been using AI for decades and decades as well, and this really can support with data integration through consolidation data from multiple systems into a single source of truth, as we were talking about earlier. Can really support with data validations, exceptions, anomalies. You can really ensure that manual intervention is reduced to the minimum, and it's becoming more and more evident, especially for a dynamic business like ours, that real-time data and analytics are key to making fluid decisions within a business. And for us, predictive analytics are also key to support automating workforce planning, which is kind of one of our objectives for this transformation that we've embarked on. And that would really support for us automated scheduling, where the technology relies on live data inflows, like what is my forecast, what is my revenue, kind of what business is coming in, what am I planning as a business, kind of looking back at historical trends, because we're a seasonal business, and kind of what happens at this time of the year, and really configuring your workforce in terms of skill set, in terms of working hours, availability, and so on, because that really underpins for us that automated scheduling. So you can, a click of a few buttons, a manager can actually say, I just want to schedule for next week because this is the business coming in, these are the available people that I have, and it just creates that roster for the week. And that's not gospel, right? It really isn't gospel. It just does the heavy lifting. It just says, well, actually, this is what you should be planning for, and you can still go in and refining depending on knowledge, that human knowledge that the technology cannot know at this point, and maybe potentially never, we don't know what the technology doesn't know. So then you're actually positioning that manager as a strategic asset to the business, because they're coming in to refine that schedule, to refine that labor cost with the information that they have, which is value add or cost saving. It's not the transactional, it's not kind of the stuff that happens automatically almost. And for us, really, this needs to become a touch of a button, and it really releases people into that more value add activity, revenue generation, team engagement, customer satisfaction. As we were talking earlier, that's kind of where we want to position our managers, and that's how we're looking in terms of using the tech. And workforce management for us sits at the core of the decision making for which tech we're going to go with. So again, having that clarity as what is your driver, why are you doing what you're doing? And whilst the tech is doing that heavy lifting, human insight is critical, because the automation can cleanse the data, it can consolidate the data, it can create visuals, but it can't add the context. It can't add a narrative. It can't say how relevant it is for the business on that particular day, right? Because for us, for example, we might have a large event coming in and that's been planned in, but we also have kind of on-demand business and that wasn't planned in. So again, it just leaves the manager to focus on these value add. Well, actually, we can absorb that business because there is capacity to absorb that additional event into it just adds that relevance, that business relevance. Automation can flag anomalies, but only a human can interpret like why and what am I doing with this next? What am I saying? The automation can do the speed, but only you can, as a manager, bring that empathy if it's required, right? It just brings that kind of that connection. And we're hospitality, we're high contact business. So for us, that is quite critical, and ensuring that messaging to your team members and kind of how messaging flows through in that dynamic way for the type of business that we are. I think that's key, and that's how we're envisioning to kind of use that technology.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, the workforce management piece is brilliant. I've seen so many systems that are automating that, and it's really clever in terms of that analytics, like you've just said, seasonal, looking at trends, looking at the data, and then just generating like those rotas for you that, yes, you absolutely can go in and personalize and change. And one example that a vendor gave in terms of that human aspect is that the manager on the site might know that Bob and Jenny get a taxi together on shift because they live next door to each other, and the tech's not going to be able to know that. So it's things like that you can then go, oh, okay, I'm going to tweak it and bring that human side in. But the workforce management stuff I'm seeing at the moment is very clever. I'm enjoying that. So thanks for that, Anna. We have got, just conscious of time, we've got one poll question, which will pop up on your screens now. We talked earlier about the data being underutilized and how that's probably changed in the last 5 or 6 years. So the next question is looking ahead. Where do you think payroll and reward data will add the most value to C-suite decision making over the next 5 years? So is that going to be in workforce wellbeing and productivity? Is it going to be around diversity, equity, and inclusion? Will it be ESG and corporate reputation, or financial performance and cost management? And whilst those kind of results are coming in, Anna, I'm going to ask you, if you had to choose one priority where payroll and reward data could make the biggest impact in the next 5 years, what would it be, just while those results are coming in?
Yes, I'm going to lean back into that into my ethos of us becoming a center for workforce intelligence, and I'm going to say, for me, probably workforce cost optimization. There is a lot of economic turmoil and uncertainty around ever evolving workforce models. There is a significant increasing pressure on margins, I think, for a lot of business. The ability to understand, predict, and optimize workforce cost will be a C-suite priority. And I think if we can be part of that and we can optimize cost, we can almost make an influence on all other areas in terms of well-being and all the kind of pillars of well-being: emotional, physical, financial, psychological, because if we support businesses actually in being more profitable and being smarter with managing payroll costs, we maybe can release a bit more budget to focus on other areas as well. Giving businesses that total pay and reward cost visibility is key. It enables better decisions. You can ensure you're aligned with organizational goals. It's almost a really easy and complex, but because that a lot of organizations will be looking at costs. And I think if we can tap into that, support that, because we know where talent is, we know where these improvements can be driven. If we can make sure cost is optimized, we can then release that budget, and we can do scenario calculations, we can do forecasting, we can say, if we are to implement this strategy at the next pay review, this is what it's going to look like. It's going to release X amount of money to actually look at this initiative. And it's really interesting because I was speaking to a lot of people and doing some research, and I came across some interesting studies that actually some of the data says that the future of workforce is shifting and will shift significantly from paying for present to paying for impact. And I think us as professionals, we really need to think, okay, if we're shifting from that, what is our impact? For us as a hospitality business, for example, workforce mix and the flexibility is critical. It's critical that we understand the cost and productivity implications of permanent versus contingent labor. Agency workers, for example, in our industries are quite commonplace. If you have a massive event, you're going to need to resource that. And we can play a key role to get the business to understand how is it that we can utilize that budget in the most efficient and effective way to really, really, release that budget to actually spend it on more value add and, all sorts of initiative, well-being, diversity, equity, and inclusion. There is so much that we can do if we get the core right. If we can ensure that businesses can manage that cost effectively, we can then release capacity and budget to do all the other stuff.
Yeah, Absolutely. Thanks for that, Anna. I completely agree. And just looking at the results to the poll as well, which are on screen. So we've got 39%. It's quite interesting split, 39% workforce wellbeing and productivity, which is obviously really important. And I think increasingly so in this I hate saying post-pandemic, but in this post-pandemic world, obviously that workforce wellbeing piece has just increased massively. Diversity, equity and inclusion, it's good to see that there, 26%. Interesting, ESG and corporate reputation not represented in here, and that financial performance and cost management 35%. And Andrea, as you've said as well, if you've got the analytics on wellbeing, productivity, DEI and ESG, they all ultimately do impact on financial performance. Yeah, they do. Of course they do. So if we understand that and can provide insight on these, this will enable the C-suite to focus on the workforce costs and their impact on financial performance, which is aligned with Anna's comment as well. Jodie's such a wide remit of skills required. Interesting to see who's being asked to do these tasks in different businesses. It's a good question.
I think there's an opportunity there. I think going to Jodie's question, there's an opportunity. Who's being asked? I think we should ask ourselves, should we fill that gap, and to what degree, and what is it that we need to develop within ourselves, within the industry, to actually fill that gap? Because with every challenge comes an opportunity, and this is a massive opportunity for us as an industry. I see the development of technology and AI as a massive opportunity, because if I could subcontract all my transactional repetitive tasks to AI, I would. If I could, I really want a big payroll button that I can press at the end of the month and say done, because what I want to do, I want a business partner. I want to see the pressure points of the business. I want to know where the business is going. I'm very interested in where the business is going and how I align to that. If we were to do a show of hands, which we wouldn't, how many of us do we truly understand what the vision and value is of our organization? Where is the organization going, and what is my role to play in that? And that's what I want to do, and that's where I would like to see the industry going. How do I become an important piece of that strategic canvas? Where is my organization going? What is my piece in that? And that's where I want to get stuck in. That's where I see the future of the industry going. I love the big payroll button. I want one as soon as possible for me and my team. And, I'm really excited of what technology can do for us and AI can do for us to kind of just create the space. I'm a strong advocate of where you create the space, then the innovation, the creativity, free flow of thinking really goes out there and say, okay, so now what for me? So what is tech is here, AI is here, now what? And then so what? I really like this kind of reflective model of saying, okay, so what for me then? This is what I want to do. And this is what I'm so excited to actually all work together from all aspects of the industry, whether you're reward strategy, CIPP, GPA, whether you're operating within your own industry, your bureau, your in-house, your consultant, your tech, wherever we are. I think there is that need for that effort to kind of say, actually, we want a piece of that strategic canvas. We do, and we deserve it, and we really need to work very hard together to define and develop ourselves into that, filling that gap. And Jodie, to your point, this is where I think it's an opportunity for us. Who is it? If not me, then who? Or if not us, then who?
And who? I love that, Anna. And I do remember having a conversation with you where you said, I just give people reports on information. They don't ask for them. I give it to them. And it is having that power and that, like, look, this is what I can give you. This is the value that I bring. And I love that, because I spent a lot of my early career talking about the fact that payroll's more than a button. There isn't a big red magic payroll button. Well, actually now there is, and that's great that there is. And it comes back to actually thinking about how we reframe that language. Yes, there is a payroll button. Yes, it will do that processing and that calculation. However, there's more to it. And this is what I am now bringing to you, because that button does that processing piece. Right, Anna, I have loved listening and having this conversation with you, and looking at the comments in the chat. I think it's been really valuable, and everyone hopefully has taken something away and learned from the discussion. As I say, there will be a write-up, and we are going to host it on demand. So thank you very much for sharing your insight, and thank you everyone for attending as well and contributing to the discussion. We have got a few weeks before our next Payroll and Reward Insight session, which is on the 30th of October. And actually that one is going probably to carry on a little bit the theme from today, because it's focusing on AI in payroll and demystifying some of those payroll myths. So if you have enjoyed the session, please make sure you sign up for the next one on the 30th of October, and also let us know whether you would be likely to recommend this series to a colleague.
That was Data Analytics in Decision Making, originally recorded by Reward Strategy and brought to you here as a special episode of the Payroll Podcast. My thanks again to the team at Reward Strategy for making it available. And if you do want more on turning payroll data into strategic influence, I do actually cover this extensively in my new book, The Payroll Pivot, From Invisibility to Influence. There's a free chapter and the fear tax handout waiting for you at thepayrollpivot.com. So go and check that out. If this episode landed with you, share it with a colleague who needs to hear it, because that's how we move this profession forward, one conversation at a time. Until next time, I've been your host. My name is Nick Day, and thank you for listening. Deals, the global platform built for complexity. From payslips, benefits, and compliance in over 150 countries, Deals centralizes everything in one secure workflow. Plus, real-time visibility across your entire workforce. No fragmented systems, no chasing local vendors. Just accurate, compliant pay delivered on time, every time. See why more than 40,000 businesses trust Deal. Visit DEEL.com/NickDay to book your demo. That's DEEL.com/NickDay.